Lithuania is the latest European country that has for decades followed the United States blindly, caused self-inflicted pain in the meantime, and now suddenly realizes this is not in fact in its own interest, because Lithuania is now admitting that it was a huge strategic mistake, like jumping in front of a train, as the Lithuanian Prime Minister calls it in an interview, to be the first and the only European Union country to open a Taiwanese representative office in 2021, and of course in the process angering China. And now the Lithuanian Prime Minister, which is called Inga Ruginiene, she says that Lithuania is now starting the very complicated process, and I can imagine that, of turning back the clock in order to normalize relations with China, as the ties were completely cut off. And just like this, Lithuania is the latest European country to make a huge U-turn, crawling back to China and begging, in fact, to be friends again. Before we move on, please like the channel, please like the video, and that will be already a very big help. So what happened? Well, in 2021, Lithuania allowed Taiwan to open a representative office, a de facto embassy in Vilnius, and that is of course the capital of Lithuania. And the question is, why does Lithuania do that? What is their gain? Because Taiwan is very far away. They don't have much economical ties with the country. I mean, Lithuania and Taiwan are very unusual suspects to have anything as a close relationship. Well, the thing was that at that time there was a lot of decoupling going on, and there was this broader idea that the Western world should decouple from China, and Lithuania, which of course is a bit stuck in northeastern Europe, wanted obviously to be in the good favors of the United States, want to be best in class, show daddy how good a student they were, sucking up to the boss, if you want, going the extra mile. And that is why they decided to cut off all these ties with China. Well, they didn't decide that, but they made this drastic move to give Taiwan a representative office in Lithuania, which for sure would anger China. And that move was obviously supported by the US and also Europe. And the bet from Lithuania was to be a first mover of this broad Western decoupling and hopefully try to reap the strategic benefits from it from the United States. And the Lithuanians must have thought, well, for a very low cost, yes, we know the Chinese would be angry, but for a very low cost, we can become the boss' new favorite. At that time, it's also important to mention that Lithuania was already relatively decoupled from China. It was in fact in Europe the country who was least dependent on China, and it only accounted for 0.7% of its exports to China and 3.7% of its imports from China. And of course, on top of that, there was a very genuine, real expectation that there would be a payoff from Taiwan, who indeed committed to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in Lithuania, and Taiwan set up a 200 million USD fund to invest in the country. So those were the reasons why Lithuania decided to set up that Taiwanese office in Vilnius. Now, it was of course in a very moment painfully obvious that Lithuania could never do this without US or European backing. They're never ever going to take on China by itself. It's a country of less than 3 million people. It is of course a very small city in China, if you were, and also insignificant for China in some ways. But that being said, I thought at that time already, when I read about this news, that Lithuania would be deluded. Knowing China, I knew that somehow there would be huge repercussions. And China is indeed very good in carefully crafting a response with maximal pain, and that is exactly what China did over the last 4 years. And the pain that China inflicted, turns out, was not small at all, and that was very contrary to Lithuanian expectations, because China predictably stopped importing Lithuanian goods, but it didn't limit itself only to that. It also blocked exports from other European countries which used Lithuanian components in their products. And that is something, of course, Lithuania did not expect, and it was actually very damaging for the country, because 80 to 90% of Lithuanian exports are to other European countries. So China here responded not only bilaterally, but also imposed sanctions on the European Union as a single market on other European countries. And on top of that, the move, in fact, in Lithuania turned out to be very unpopular. The people in Lithuania, only 13% of the people supported Lithuania, and most people in Lithuania thought, why are we creating a problem here when there is no problem at all? And why are we going out of our way to provoke China on an issue that has nothing to do with Lithuania at all? The basic question was from the Lithuanian public, why are we meddling in this whole China-Taiwan issue? This has nothing to do with us. And another point important here to make is that Lithuania actually also completely misread the room. Because the broader Western decoupling, and there was a lot of talk about that in those days, which of course was also very diluted already, that idea itself that you could decouple from China completely, but that broader Western decoupling from China didn't happen at all. And Lithuania found itself actually the only country in the West that completely was cut off from China in an economical way. So far from being the new employee sucking up to the boss, there was an enormous amount of self-inflicted pain without any reason at all. This could have been avoided completely. And of course, the bigger picture here is that Lithuania was severing ties with China to prove its loyalty to the United States, to United States-led order. And now, of course, it's the United States who's tearing up that order. And of course, Lithuania is now the latest case of collateral damage. So, long story short, Lithuania is doing now 180 degrees U-turn, and the current government's priority is now really to restore relations with Beijing. And the Lithuanian Prime Minister added in the interview, this was probably Lithuania's big mistake, thinking that if we acted on our own and did something first, the world would suddenly appreciate it. We tried it, we have the Taiwanese office, but the world did not appreciate it. No one appreciated it. And then she added also, Lithuania's approach towards China should be based on a unified European position and a clear focus on national interests. And there we have it, national interests. It seems to me that it starts to dawn on a lot of European countries that perhaps they should think a bit more about national interest instead of blindly following what the US or even the European Union, for that matter, is saying about certain things. Because in fact the European Union has also quietly dropped Lithuania since December last year. Because on December 1st, 2025, the European Union dropped a trade dispute it launched against China in 2022, in which it accused Beijing of so-called discriminatory trade practices against Lithuania. So the European Union, changing its anti-China agenda, trying to restore ties with Beijing, is now also happening. And Lithuania now, of course, is left to hold the bag. It's also dropped here by the Europeans. And in a way, we see here that Lithuania is experiencing its own Nexperia moment. Remember, Nexperia is the Chinese semiconductor company, which was where the Dutch government tried to nationalize it on the demand of the Americans. And in the end, of course, very quickly, the Chinese reacted fiercely, and that thing has not been resolved until now. But it's a clear example, of course, when you follow the Americans and don't think about your own national interest, well, you do get a lot of payback, and you do get a lot of self-inflicted pain. And the Lithuania case is very much similar. And indeed, as mentioned, the Lithuania case is of course a broader trend of what's happening in Europe right now, the need of many European countries to go back to China, begging them in fact, and hope to get back in China's good graces. And I suspect we will see a lot more of this coming over the next weeks. Anyway, thank you for watching. Let's see each other next time. Bye bye.